Imagine this: New York City, the roaring 20s. The streets are alive with the sounds of jazz and the hum of streetcars, and behind every corner lies a hidden world of secrets and power plays. Amid this vibrant, gritty city, a young immigrant rises from the bottom rungs of society to become the ruler of its underworld. This man isn't just any gangster, he's the mastermind who would forever change the structure of organized crime. His name is Charles Luciano, but most know him as Lucky. Was it fortune, skill, or simply ruthlessness that propelled him to the top? Today, we're diving into the story of Charles "Lucky" Luciano, the man who took control of New York's criminal underworld and molded it into something even law enforcement had never seen before. Part 1. A childhood of hardship and hustling. Our story begins in Sicily in 1897. Born Salvatore Lucania, young Luciano grew up in a small town, far from the glamour he would one day surround himself with. His family was poor, and like countless others, they saw America as a beacon of opportunity. They left Italy, setting sail across the Atlantic to start fresh on the Lower East Side of New York City. But New York City was no easy life. The slums of the Lower East Side were teeming with immigrant families struggling to make ends meet. Crime was woven into the fabric of daily life, and as a young boy, Luciano quickly learned that if you wanted something, you had to be willing to take it. By his teenage years, Luciano had embraced the streets, carving out a name for himself in petty thefts and shady deals. But Luciano's ambitions went beyond survival. He was ambitious and fearless, and he had the kind of charisma that drew others to him. Soon, he joined the infamous 5 Points Gang, one of New York's most dangerous criminal outfits. This was where Luciano would learn the ropes, gain street smarts, and hone his skills for a career that would make him legendary. Part 2. The Making of Lucky, a near-death encounter. Luciano's rise was anything but smooth. In 1929, he faced one of the darkest chapters of his life. Luciano was abducted, viciously beaten, stabbed, and left for dead on a Staten Island beach. But he survived, barely, and refused to identify his attackers. This incident not only toughened him, but also earned him a new reputation. From then on, people called him Lucky. Some say it was luck. Others say it was a signal of just how untouchable he was. The scars he carried from that attack were like medals of honor in the criminal world, proof that he could endure anything thrown his way. And for Luciano, this experience only fueled his drive. He emerged from it with a hardened resolve and a clearer vision of what he wanted: power, control, and the entire New York underworld. Part 3. Prohibition, an opportunity like no other. Just a year later, in 1920, Luciano's ambition found a golden opportunity. The United States government made the decision to prohibit alcohol. While prohibition was meant to curb vice, it had the opposite effect. Demand for alcohol skyrocketed, and Luciano recognized the lucrative opportunity staring him in the face. Luciano had the foresight to think beyond petty gang disputes. Instead, he envisioned a powerful network of organized criminals who could run an entire illegal economy. He formed alliances with two influential figures, Jewish mobsters Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel. Together, they forged partnerships across ethnic lines that no one had dared cross before. The Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangs worked together, transforming the underworld into a well-oiled machine that generated millions. But Luciano's innovation wasn't just in smuggling alcohol. He understood that real success meant creating structure. He pushed for business-like operations, ensuring his bootlegging network was as efficient as any legitimate business. Luciano wasn't just playing the game, he was rewriting the rules. Part 4. Consolidating Power. The formation of the Commission. In the early 1930s, the New York underworld was in chaos, with gang leaders constantly at war. But Luciano had a bold plan. In 1931, he took decisive action against the two most powerful mafia bosses, Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. He orchestrated their assassinations, eliminating his rivals and taking control. But unlike the old bosses, Luciano's goal wasn't to rule alone. Luciano introduced something unprecedented: the Commission. This was a governing body that included representatives from each major crime family. It wasn't a dictatorship, it was a council. Each boss would have a voice, and disputes could be settled without bloodshed. The Commission's purpose was simple: to manage the crime families like a board of directors in a corporation, minimizing conflicts and maximizing profits. By establishing the Commission, Luciano did something extraordinary. He turned a chaotic network of criminals into an organized, cooperative syndicate that expanded across the country. He was no longer just a gangster, he was the architect of a criminal empire. Part 5. Legal Troubles and the Rise of Thomas Dewey. Luciano's iron grip on New York's underworld wasn't going unnoticed. By the mid-1930s, authorities were desperate to bring him down, and one man in particular had made it his mission to see Luciano behind bars: Thomas Dewey, a sharp and determined district attorney. Dewey zeroed in on Luciano's involvement in prostitution rings across the city, collecting enough evidence to arrest him in 1936. Despite Luciano's best efforts to evade the law, Dewey secured a conviction, and Luciano was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. Suddenly, the man who had ruled New York's criminal empire was isolated, locked away from the world he had once controlled. But Luciano wasn't ready to be forgotten, and his influence would soon find a way to surface again. Part 6. World War II. Operation Underworld. Then, a twist of fate. In the early 1940s, the United States found itself embroiled in World War II. The government feared Axis sabotage, especially on the vital New York docks, where military supplies were being shipped. But there was one man who could secure the docks and ensure the safety of New York's waterfront: Charles "Lucky" Luciano. In a secretive arrangement known as Operation Underworld, the U.S. Navy struck a deal with Luciano. In exchange for helping secure the docks and preventing sabotage, Luciano would be granted a commuted sentence. Even behind bars, Luciano's influence reached beyond his prison walls, showing just how embedded he was in the city's veins. Following the war, Luciano was paroled in 1946, but there was a catch. He was deported to Italy, his homeland, as a condition of his release. For a man who had built his empire in New York, exile was a bitter pill. Yet even from across the ocean, Luciano's reputation and influence continued to ripple across the underworld. Part 7. The final chapter in Italy. In Italy, Luciano's life took on a different tone. He attempted to recreate his operations on European soil, hoping to rebuild what he had lost in America. He connected with criminal circles across Italy and even had ties to the emerging drug trade, hoping to profit from heroin distribution. Despite his efforts, Luciano's health began to deteriorate. By the early 1960s, he was dealing with heart issues and a frail body that mirrored the decline of his empire. In 1962, Luciano passed away from a heart attack at the Naples airport. Some say he was there for a meeting to discuss one last criminal deal. Even in his final moments, Luciano was scheming, dreaming of power. Some see Luciano as a villain, others as a visionary. But one thing is clear: Charles "Lucky" Luciano was a man who changed the world of organized crime forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Be sure to subscribe for more untold stories of history's most infamous figures.